everyone, it's Cassie. Welcome back for another Trinity Stamps video. Today we're going to be making an Easter card. And so let's talk about the products we're using. I have the brand new Brushstroke Bunnies. We also have our checkered background. This is the add-on hearts. And then this is an older one. It's the Spring Day Scene Builder, but it is definitely needed for this one because we're making a scene. And we're going to go ahead and start with that checkered background, add on the hearts. And I'm going to use some watercolor paper. I've put that stencil over the top. I have some spun sugar, distress spray stain, and I'm very lightly spraying that mostly at the top. I just wanted that kind of just mostly to stick to the top, and that's what we got. It's nice and subtle. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that is nice and dry before we move on to the next part. So I'll use my heat tool for that, and then I'm going to tack our Spring Day Scene Builder down to the bottom, and I'm going to bring out my blending buddy, and we are going to bring in some Distress ink in the color Bundled Sage. I'll lightly just ink that all around the bottom, and then we're going to bring in some Speckled Egg for the sides. So I like how adding that background, the little hearts to the background, just adds a little extra something. So obviously this isn't like a realistic scene, it's, but it's fun to add some of those extras to the background. And this is a nice, soft, subtle background. Next, I'm bringing in some tea dye, Distress Spray Stain. I splattered a little bit of that on there, and I'm going to use my microfiber cloth to lift up a lot of that color. I want that to be nice and subtle in the background as well, but I just want some texture back there. And so the next thing I'm going to do is bring in my water sprayer, and I'm just going to spritz some water all over that, let that sit for a few seconds, and then dab that up. And then we'll heat set that to make sure that is nice and dry. And you can see we have this really fun textured background. All right, our next step would be to bring in our stamps. So once again, that's the Brushstroke Bunnies. And I'm going to put this into my MISTI, and we're going to leave it in the MISTI. So I've decided on these three little bunnies, and I wanted the one bunny to kind of be off the edge, so what I'm going to do is just move that over one square, basically, and I'm going to use another magnet to make sure that that doesn't move anywhere. And then we're going to ink up our bunnies using some Twiggy Brown ink by Ink on 3. And I'm going to do that a couple of times. And like I said, I'm going to leave this in my MISTI, but I am going to bring in a water brush. We are going to do a little bit of watercoloring with these bunnies. I'm going to take the color, the Twiggy Brown that is, that we stamped our bunnies in, and we're just going to start bringing some of that color out. Yes, it's going to soften that quite a bit, and that's okay. And it's going to even bring in some of that green from our Bundled Sage that's in the background. I'll take some of that Twiggy Brown and put it right down onto my glass mat and pick some of that color up with my water brush so that we can add a little bit of dimension to our bunnies. But we're going to move on to our next bunny. Just put down a good amount of water on him. And once again, bring in some more of that Twiggy Brown. Watercolor works best, I've said this several times, if we work in layers. So we're going to let this dry, and then we can do a few more layers here. But drawing out some of that color from this bunny as well, and bringing in some more of that Twiggy Brown. And I'm just, like I said, taking the cap off my color or my ink pad and just putting some of that color right down onto the glass mat. And I'm just putting my shadowing and shading where I think it would look good. Add a little bit more color to this bunny. And then I am going to bring in my heat tool. Now, keep in mind that your MISTI is not necessarily heat resistant, so I'm going to keep that tool moving, and I'm only going to keep it on there for just a few seconds. I really just want that water to dry most of the way. Okay, and so I'm keeping that moving and just making sure that I don't mess up my MISTI or anything. All right, so now I'm going to ink up those bunnies again, and we're going to stamp that right on top. This is why I didn't pull this out of the MISTI. And look at that. That looks really good. It's nice and crisp, but we are going to do a little bit more layering. So I've got a little bit more of that Twiggy Brown, and we're just going to add a little bit of color where I think it would look good. Just doing a little bit more shadowing on these bunnies. Because with watercolor, it will dry back a decent amount, and so I find that I have to work in layers and bring that color back in a little bit more. And this is a fine detailed water brush, really. All right, then once I'm happy with how those bunnies have turned out, we're going to clean up our mess, and we'll pull this out of our MISTI They're so cute. They just remind me of the little chocolate bunnies that you get at Easter time. Okay, but now I've decided that that color looks fairly flat on there. Those bunnies look kind of flat. So we're going to bring in that bundled sage and we're going to add some shadowing underneath them. Just using that same green. I'm even going to put some down for the bunny that's jumping because he would leave behind a little bit of a shadow as well. And I think that really adds to the scene. For our sentiment, I'm going to bring in the one that says Happy New Year, but I'm only going to stamp the happy. I know you could cut this apart, but I just can't seem to do that with this stamp. So I'm going to leave it as is, and we'll just ink up the happy, and then we'll bring in Easter and ink that up with our Twiggy brown. We're stamping this onto some craft cardstock. So our sentiment says Happy Easter. Then we can bring in our guillotine trimmer, and then we can trim this down. We'll bring in our panel, and I'm going to take a look at that. I decide I want to cut this one right-hand edge with a little bit of an angle. And then I'm going to bring in the Trinity Stamps adhesive foam strips. These are new, but they're amazing, and they're nice and thin. They're perfect for so many of those small things that you might want to pop up on your cards. They work perfectly on so many of the sentiments that Trinity Stamps has, and they also have their matching dies for. So I love these. They're wonderful, and they are double-sided adhesive, so it's perfect. I'll just peel off that adhesive, and then we'll stick that down, kind of lining that up using my glass mat, trimming off the excess. And then I decided to bring in the Bitty Charms. These are brand new, but they're nice and pastel-y. And there are a lot of different shapes in there. We've got stars, we've got hearts, we've got moons, we have some opened pieces too. They have like the centers out of them. And I'm just picking out some really pretty pieces that would match my background. There's some blues, there's some pinks, there's some greens, there's some yellows in there. And I am being pretty liberal with it. Now you really can't tell here as I'm putting these down using my pickup stick and that crafty glue friend. But I will show you at the end and you will see how pretty that really does look. For my base, it measures 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches, and I decide to bring back in our Spring Day Scene Builder stencil and more of that bundled sage along with our blending buddies. And we've got some grass down there. And then once again, we'll bring in our speckled egg, and I'm going to just blend that all around the edge of our card. I love, as I always say, bringing the outside in, and this is a fun way to do that. If you wanted, you could even stamp one of your bunnies in there. Now, this is not watercolor paper, so I chose not to do a bunny in there. But what you're going to need to do is score this at 4.25 inches with your Teflon folder, and then you have a card base. We'll bring in our crafty glue friend, and we will attach our panel down to our base using that liquid glue. And once that's on there, that's going to finish off this beautifully soft Easter card. I love how this turned out, and take a look at that shine from those embellishments. Isn't that fun? Oh, I hope you like it as much as I do. If you do, hit that like button. Consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And be sure to check out all that Trinity Stamps has going on over on their blog, Facebook page, and Instagram for more crafty inspiration. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope you have a great day.